All right, so day one of kinesiology. We are getting through some of our anatomy today. This is going to be the nervous system to start with. And we're going to kind of break that down, get a really good understanding of that. And then once we do, that is going to help us understand our kinesiology on a much deeper level. I know sometimes I will tell you, I'll warn you now, it feels a little bit like we're getting into the weeds sometimes. We're getting into like real deep microanatomy. I'm going to be talking a lot about cells today. And that'll feel like this feels a little too zoomed in. I just want to know how to lift a dumbbell. Trust me, understanding the small microanatomy gives you a much richer understanding of the large macroanatomy, which gives you a much bigger understanding of the principles. And those principles are going to really guide you when it comes to like writing effective programs, especially this module where we are going to be talking a lot about overactive muscles, which really kind of starts at your nervous system. So purpose of today's lesson is to give you guys a fundamental overview of the first third of the kinetic chain by understanding the structures there and understanding the physiologic functions there. It'll give you guys valuable comprehensive insight. Big NASM talk. It'll give you a really good understanding of everything when we get to the large stuff in the future. So we want you guys to understand the structure and the function of your nervous system. That's the anatomy, which is the structure, and the physiology, which is the function. And then we get to talk about how it adapts and how it responds to stress. So when I say the human movement system, I keep saying kinetic chain, I keep saying human movement system. Which is it? Well, they mean the same thing. The human movement system is your kinetic chain, right? And what that means is it's three, and we call it interdependent systems, right? They really rely on each other in order to work to control the body and produce human movement. So it's comprised of three systems, right? And you think about like systems in your body, right? Whoop, we lost somebody. You think about like systems in your body, right? You get your respiratory system, it extracts oxygen from the environment. You get your cardiovascular system, which pumps blood around your body. You get your digestive system, which breaks down food. You got all kinds of systems, you know? The human movement system is three of these kind of coming together. It's your muscular system, which manipulates things and moves things around, your nervous system, which controls all of that, and your skeletal system, which gives you a framework to move stuff around, right? Like without, all of these components really need to work together. So the nervous system is the command center. That's what we're going to spend our time talking about today, right? It is responsible for controlling human movement. Now, when I say controlling human movement, what do I mean? What is it controlling? Well, that's where your muscular system comes in. Your muscular system, which is under the control of your nervous system, is responsible for creating contractions. So, you get these really cool little organs we call muscles, and they shorten and then they relax, and they shorten and they relax. But if we didn't, and that's great. But if that's all we had, if we had like a nervous system and a muscular system, we would basically be jellyfish. I mean it. Like jellyfish don't have any bones. They got some contractile elements. So they got like muscle, and they got a nervous system. In fact, they're mostly a one big giant nervous system. He said, not knowing that much about jellyfish. But like, we wouldn't have any like framework. It'd be pretty hard for us to move around. So lastly, we've got our skeletal system, and that framework protects all of our delicate structures. And it gives us what's probably most important for us in our industry, levers. So it gives us these really cool like levers to move around. So giving you guys just a very bad example of what I mean here as I try to draw. I cannot draw, so I draw dog bones because I don't know how to draw a regular bone. So there's like a dog bone, there's another dog bone. This space, oh my God, that's supposed to be an arrow. This space right here between these two structures is a point where I can manipulate things, right? I can really create like a lot of movement. It can swing this way, or maybe it can swing this way, right? But I need something to attach to that in order to move it around. So that's really where like a muscle comes in, right? I might tie a muscle from here, over there, right? And then I might tie a different antagonist muscle on the other side, right? Doing the exact same thing. And they might look a little bit different, you know. But now what that allows is this muscle can pull this way. Maybe this muscle can pull that way. And that is going to create that manipulation I'm talking about. That's going to, you know, when this one contracts, it's going to swing the bone that way. And when this one contracts, you know, it's going to swing the bone in the exact opposite direction, right? So now, it's not the exact opposite direction. Again, not a good artist. So that is how we can kind of swing things around, right? If my example here is my elbow, right? I contract this muscle here, I pull it, right? I kind of drag it around and it brings my elbow in. And if I contract this one here and I pull it, right? It's going to create extension. So those are sort of the antagonist muscles that we're seeing there. They're going to swing my bones in various different directions. So they're acting as levers that my muscular system can manipulate under the control of my nervous system. So it is a very much an interdependent system. And the reason we call it, you know, the human movement system is because it creates human movement. And the reason we call it the kinetic chain is because that's how it works. It works like a chain, you know? What's that classic phrase? You're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And so like if there's one weak link in your kinetic chain, it's going to alter your human movement. You're probably going to end up with some type of overuse injury. My brain learns how to control a muscle the wrong way. My muscle is going to drag around my skeletal system in the wrong way. So then my skeletal system might rub and I might start getting a clicking in my shoulder, right? And that's, you know, a sign of an early sign of what could get to become like shoulder pain and become like full on what we call shoulder impingement. So if one component of the chain's not working properly, it will directly affect those other components. So that's really what we're going to start our day, our class talking about. We're going to look at these three main systems here. Today, we're starting with the nervous system. And the reason we're talking about all this is because this class, our kinesiology class, is where we are studying what we call structural kinesiology, right? Or just kines. And it's the study of muscles and how those muscles are involved in human movement. So we're looking at your skeletal system and your muscular system, but because all of it is under the control of your nervous system, we got to start there. We're gonna sort of build a company almost. You know, that company is your body, and we're gonna start with your nervous system. We're gonna start with the CEO who's in charge of everything. And then that guy is going to, you know, just like if you were starting a company, you're the brain of the operations, you're the CEO, you're controlling everything, right? You're going to put the other people in place and you're going to make sure they're doing their jobs properly, right? So we are going to start in CEO territory today. We are starting with the brain. Like I said, and this is what you'll see in your textbook directly, kinetic chain, kinetic means forces. Chain means, you know, a bunch of stuff that's linked together. And if one of those links is messed up, all of them are messed up, you know? So here's your nervous system. Look at this thing. It is complex. Lot of stuff to look at here, you know? So you can see actually in the center, here's like your brain, and then it travels down. Look at all these like wires, you know, that's kind of what it looks like, right? All these wires running out from that center system there. That is your nervous system as a whole. So what is the nervous system? If we have to give it a definition, we're going to say it's a conglomeration, it's a bunch of stuff, of billions of cells. It's a conglomeration of billions of cells specifically designed to provide a communication network in the body. Now, that can sound kind of weird sometimes. You're like, what do you mean a communication network, right? Like, you know, like it's like Wi-Fi? Yeah, kind of, you know, like a little bit. You know, I like to think of it more, you know, because although I think it was like telephone wires, you know, but that's really how it's working. It's information going in towards the brain, but it's also information going out away from the brain, right? And that's really our sort of main concept today. If I talk about like, you know, like for instance, if I bring my coffee here, you know, I like very weak coffee. We just talked about this a couple of days ago and my history with coffee, but you know, it's got lots of cream and sugar in it because that's how I like my coffee. It's not healthy, but it's how I like it, you know. And so if I bring this to my mouth, right? There's just an excuse for me to take another sip. You know, all of my taste buds in my mouth are going to fire, and they're going to say, ooh, that's got a little bit of like whole milk in it, right? That's nice and, you know, fatty, which we love fats, right? And it's going to, oh, there's some sugar in there. Oh, we love sugars, right? So my taste buds are going to send this information to my brain. My brain's going to interpret it, right? And it's going to go, oh, great, fatty stuff. Love fatty stuff. You know, it's a good source of calories, because at the end of the day, I've still got a cave person brain. I'm seeking calories, right? I know sugar, God, we love sugar. Again, good source of calories. We should all probably know that pretty well if you've ever struggled with sugar, you know? And so my brain thinks it's great. I mean, if I was on a wheel, I don't know, it's up for debate, you know, whether or not it's actually healthy, but my brain loves it regardless. You know, I think we all know that our brains like unhealthy stuff sometimes. So what's going to happen is all that information gets interpreted by my brain, and my brain gets stoked, and then it's going to send information back that's probably going to cause me to go, well, that was really good. I'm going to go ahead and take another sip here. And so if it wants to do that, if it wants to bring that back to my mouth so I can get another sip, it needs to know how to recruit the right muscles to bring it there, right? So it's going to send information to my shoulder, my bicep. I'm going to stabilize my core a little bit. You know, I'm going to open up my jaw, like all these like things, right? They're going to kind of happen. So that's why it's a communication network, you know? It's information going away and it's information going towards. Now, that goes in both directions. It's going away from the effector site towards the brain, and then the brain is sending information away back in communication to respond to that stimulus. So that's what it is. It's billions of cells coming together, right? So we're going to divide this billions of stuff into two primary divisions here, right? We are going to see our central nervous system, which is going to be your brain and your spinal cord, and your peripheral nervous system, which are all of the peripheral nerves that branch out from your central system. So if we look at the difference between this here, if I go CNS versus PNS, if we take a look at the two different systems here, looking for a good image, you can kind of see where these nerves are actually specifically located, right? Here's the central system. It's your brain, your spinal cord, right? And then that's all very, very protected. You know, luckily you've got all the, you get your actual spine there that has this canal and hard tissue that is there to kind of protect all of that. And then all of these nerves, and we're not seeing our cranial nerves here, but they're cranial nerves. They got all these branching out like crazy. Anybody in here ever been to the Bodies exhibit? Have you ever done that? If you ever get a chance, guys, I really recommend it. It can be a little bothersome because these are like real bodies you're looking at here. But they take it and they show some of the most amazing anatomic structures you've ever seen. Let's take a look at the nervous system here. And this is only some of it. They really couldn't lay out the whole thing, but there's like what a human nervous system looks like. We're gonna lay that all out, right? You can see the central system in the middle, and then all the peripheral system like branching out there. You know, like this nerve, right? Like it branches out from here and branches down, it branches down, branches down, and then it lands maybe somewhere around here. And now there's a spider, you know, walking on the back of your arm, and you didn't know it. You know, you're walking down the street and you feel just this little bit of tingling. That information goes up to your brain thanks to those nerves. And then the information comes back and you go, so the central system is really responsible for like all the decision making. The peripheral system is responsible for carrying out those decisions. So information going away from the brain or getting the information to the brain so that it can make those decisions. So if I touch the back of my arm, my peripheral system sends that information up to my brain. And then my brain sends information back through the peripheral system again to say, that's fine. But if I stab my arm with like a pencil or something, right? Information goes into my brain and my brain goes, that's not fine. And then it moves the arm away, right? My peripheral system carries out a lot of accessory movement whenever I go to the doctor and they come anywhere near me with a needle. I'm like, My peripheral system wants to leave. My central system's like, use those leg muscles. You train for running all the time. Let's run away from that big scary needle. Constantly. Oh, we lost somebody again. Who did I lose? Who did I lose? I'm trying to, let's see here. Oh, we lost Marjan. She'll be back. So those are the two primary divisions there. Now, like I said, because it is a communication network, let's go ahead and look at the way our nervous system functions in order to understand this network, right? So when we're looking at these different divisions, and I've kind of already been describing this a little bit, we're going to look at three primary functions here. Okay, so those primary functions are going to be sensory function, integrative function, and motor function, right? So the coffee example, right? Sensory function sent the information to my brain, said that's sweet and fatty, love that. You know, a little bit of protein in there as well. I can't argue with that, right? Sensory information is like send the information, it brought all the info in. And then integrative function, my brain goes, yeah, that's freaking delicious. So then it chose to do motor information, which is the muscular response, which is like, you know, bring it up for another sip, right? The same thing would be true if you go grab a dumbbell, right? Let's say I grab a 10-pound dumbbell, right? My nervous system is going to sense that it's about 10 pounds. It's going to say, all right, we need about 10 pounds worth of muscle recruited to be able to lift it. So then integrative function will say, all right, that's how, you know, integrative function was the figuring out 10 pounds. So then motor function is going to say, all right, well, here you go. Here's 10 pounds of muscle recruitment. And I'm going to move my arm. If I bring in 20 pounds, right, it's the exact same thing. Sensory information goes in. It says it's about 20 pounds. Integrative function says, all right, we need about 20 pounds worth of muscle, right? And then motor function says, all right, well, here you go. Here's that 20 pounds worth of muscle. And if you're like me, you get into 30 pounds, it's starting to get kind of heavy. Get into 40 pounds, we're starting to reach my low repetition range. Get into 50 pounds, I'm gonna be struggling on my bicep curls. You know, not a big arm day guy. I'm sure I've got somebody in the call right now who's like, 50s are easy. I'll be over here, you know, struggling with that. So what was it? Danny, Cyrus, and Chris, we were watching, and Julio, we were watching the Terry Crews Euro training video the other day. He's like, you want the 60s? He's like, I need the 60s. So that is sort of the three functions there. So sensory function is the ability of the nervous system to sense changes in either the internal or the external environment. So the dumbbell was kind of an example of the external environment, right? My body was sensing changes there. Sorry, Marjan's not popping back in very fast. I'm just going to text her to make sure that she's still got the room code and stuff. Sorry, 1 second. We'll just get her back in here. Okay. Oh, for a second. So that's our sensory information, right? It's the sensing information. Now, like I said, it's internal or external, right? So if you taste something, if something's really hot and you touch it, that's external environment, right? And you're like, ah, right? Or if it's really sharp, or if it's really heavy. But this is also happening internally as well. Like when let's say I eat like a piece of food, right? Oh, there she is. If I eat a piece of food and it goes into my stomach acid is going to start breaking it down. But how do I know? How does my body know when to move something from my stomach into my small intestine, right? Like how does it know it's done breaking something down? Well, there are what we call stretch receptors. They're part of the sensory function of my nervous system. Yeah, they live in my digestive system, but they're part of my nervous system. So when that stretch receptor is like, oh no, that hit really hard. That's a solid chunk. It's not broken down yet. So my stomach's gonna stay closed and it's gonna keep dissolving all that food. So sensory function is both internal and external. Let's say you start exercising, right? You're walking, and then all of a sudden you start walking uphill. And the lactic acid starts to build up because it takes more muscle to work you uphill. Well, that lactic acid runs through your blood And sensory receptors in your heart go, woo, that is some acidic blood. So then what it does, speeds up your heart rate. So you can flush that lactic acid out of there. So sensory function is information going towards the brain. Now, how did my brain know how to keep the stomach closed? How did it know to speed up my heart rate? How did it know to move my hand away from the hot, the sharp, the heavy object, right? How did it learn how to do those things? That's where integrative function comes in. Integrative function is the ability of your nervous system to analyze and interpret the sensory information. That allows for proper decision making, and that allows you to produce the appropriate response. So again, like, you don't want to go into the gym, or, a different example. Let's say, have you guys ever like made that assumption where you go up to a door, and you're like, oh man, that looks like a big heavy door. And you grab it and you're like, and you just like rip it open. You're like, oh God, it's actually a very light door. Like you don't want to be like I've always wondered how Superman doesn't just rip the hinges off of every door he walks through, like give somebody, it's like somebody's choking and Superman gives him a pat on the back. How does he not send them flying across the planet? Well, it's because he's got sensory information coming in. And he's got integrative function saying, hey, let's use about 0.0000001% of your strength to do this, right? That's kind of how our nervous system works, right? I got to pick up, let's say I'm doing some warm-up sets for a deadlift, right? I go throw 135 pounds on the bar, my body's going to go, all right, we need about 135 pounds worth of muscle to lift this. Sensory information comes in, integrative function says, use this much muscle, right? Lift it up. Maybe I do 5-10 repetitions, I'm getting kind of warm, right? And then I throw another like 2 plates on there. And now I was going to go, all right, that's a little heavier, right? Now the weight's going up a little bit. We're feeling a little bit tougher here. Let's recruit sort of, this much muscle, right? So then maybe I do, maybe 3-4 reps. And by the way, this is a bad warm-up routine, just like going up 90 pounds every time. That's way too big of a jump, but it's just an example. And then last, let's say I throw on 2 more 45s. I've got, 315 on the bar, yeah. Get that up there, right? And now it's like, all right, well, we're getting kind of heavy, like let's lift about, let's recruit pretty much as much muscle as we can to kind of get this job done. So that's the integrative function, right? That's how I'm going to know how to recruit the right amount of muscle, or to recruit the correct muscle to do a job. And a lot of what we're going to talk about in this class is how this integrative function gets a little messed up through bad habits. So its job is to interpret that sensory information. Is it heavy? How much muscle needs to be recruited? If it's hot, is it dangerously hot? Should we move away? Which muscle should we use to move away, right? There's your integrative. And then lastly, we got motor function. Motor function is sort of under the control of that integrative. It says like, that's freaking hot, move your hand, This is the neuromuscular response, right? Jerking the arm away. Its job is to produce the movement. If it's heavy, let's recruit these muscles to get the job done, right? If it's sharp, let's move in the opposite direction. If it's a bee, let's leave the building. That's my motor function whenever I see a bee. Bees and needles, I don't like them. So that is sort of the 3 sort of main things that your nervous system does. That's how our nervous system sort of functions, right? Info goes in, it gets interpreted, info goes out. And that's why it's a communication network. Any questions on that, guys? How are we all feeling on that section, that chunk? Good?
Good.
Alrighty.
Feel great.
Love that.
Yeah, no question.
Oh, yes. What do you got? Oh, you said
no question. Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at proprioception here. Let's put this all together into what is probably the most important concept of the day. If you do forget everything I told you today, and you can only remember one thing, actually remember when our in-person meetups are. No. Probably the most important thing is proprioception here. Proprioception is the body's ability to sense the relative position of adjacent body parts, which is a classic overly complicated NASM definition here. The way I like to say it, it's your body's ability to understand where it is in space. So proprioception is your spatial awareness. It's your awareness of your surroundings, but it's not just your awareness of your surroundings. It's not just like that scene at in Batman Begins where he's like, you never learn to mind your surroundings. Yeah, it's not just that. It is also your body's understanding of what position it is in. So here's kind of a weird example, but if I take my hand behind my head here, I can't see my hand, and I wiggle my fingers, how do I know I'm wiggling my fingers? Now, the simple answer, you're like, your brain's you're the one wiggling them, so of course you know you're doing it. Yes, absolutely. You're still right if that's your response. But here's the thing, right? How many times have you told somebody to do something and they haven't done it? I tell people to do stuff all the time and it never gets done. I'm like, hey, we got to clean out these dishes in the sink. Come back there. Oh, still there. How do I know it's actually happening? Right? That's where proprioception comes in. So the way that your body is actually communicating with itself to understand what position it's in, right? If I raise my arm like this, right, what's happening right now is some of the muscles in my deltoid are in a semi-shortened position, right? And other muscles are in a lengthened position. So that information is going into my brain, and my brain's interpreting it and saying, oh, I guess we must be in this position here, right? I like to use this as I like to use the duck analogy when I'm describing this. This is a little bit weird example, but I always like to say, if I gave you a box and I told you there's an animal inside of it, you don't know what, you can't see inside that box. And I said, here are a couple hints to understand what animal it is. It's got webbed feet. So now instantly your brain is just going to run through a Rolodex of information that you have and say, all right, what are all the animals that have like webbed feet, right? Boom, boom, boom. You're going to lay them all out. This animal's got feathers, and you're like, okay, well, that eliminates, all the platypuses and stuff, that have webbed feet, or it eliminates frogs that have webbed feet, right? You're running it, you're sort of like figuring out the information. I said it's got a bill. You're like, oh, it's got a bill. It doesn't have a beak. Okay, great. Certain section of birds goes away, and it quacks. You're like, not a goose, must be a duck. Right? All that information comes in, you ran it past all the information. The more information you got, the more your brain was able to sort of piece it together, and it made an understanding of what's in that box. That's what's happening with proprioception. Information goes into your brain from a muscle and says, like, I'm in this position here. And another muscle saying, oh, well, I'm in this position here. And then all that information goes into your brain. If I told you, your knees are bent at about halfway as far as they're able. Your ankle is bent about close to about like 90% as far as it's able. And then your hips are bent about 60% as much as they are able to. What position are you in? The answer should be a squat, right? Like if I go from here, and I bend my knees about 50% of the way, and my ankles come forward about 90% of the way, my hips go about 60% of the way, right? I'm going to be in a pretty much like just broken parallel body weight squat, right? And that is the position that we're in. My brain gets all that information and interprets all that information, and it knows what position it's in. And that's great. We love proprioception. Thank goodness we have this. Just so you guys know, I am not nearly as cool as my favorite teacher that I had when he was trying to teach about proprioception. Once he taught about once he taught proprioception, it was a thing in the class after that. And he would do this thing where he kept a Nerf ball, like it was like only about that big. And if you were like on your phone, or if you were just like goofing off in class, or if you were like falling asleep, he would give you fair warning by saying, proprioception, and then he would throw that ball at you. If you weren't paying attention, just and it was great. It was all about, like, he would say, it's all about spatial awareness, right? You gotta mind your mind your surroundings. So we often want to train our clients to enhance or develop their proprioception. The more understanding that your client has about their body position, the more coordination they're going to have, the better balance they're going to have, and probably most importantly, the better posture they're going to have. So, like I said, this is probably our most important term of the day. Everything that we do is meant to improve proprioception. So it improves our balance, coordination, posture, and it allows us to adapt to our surrounding without necessarily having to think about movement, because our brain's going to know which muscles to move. Now, as great as that is, here's the problem. All of us have altered proprioception. We've kind of screwed up our proprioception just a little bit. At least I'm assuming all of us, so let's take a look at an example here, right? Let's take a look at altered proprioception. That's not good typing. How many times have you guys seen somebody in like a group exercise class or something like that squat like this in the before example here, right? How many times have you guys seen somebody do this, right? They do this kind of squat here. That's like, the butt out squat, right? Does this look like a squat to you guys? Kinda. To me, it looks more like a hinge, right? So if let's say I'm the world's greatest trainer, or I'm the world's greatest like explainer of how to do a squat, and I give a perfect instruction on how to do a squat, right? I'm like, all right, you're going to keep your chest up. You're going to move at this angle. You can do this. You can squat down, right? And now my client has this perfect image of what a squat should look like and how to do it. And they do it like this. Why the heck did they do it like that when they know that an ideal squat should look something a little bit more like that? Why did it happen? Well, chances are they've got tight muscles somewhere that is saying, yeah, I mean, we couldn't possibly move like that. So we have to move like this instead. So they have altered proprioception. It's like in this example here, honestly, the reason this guy's probably leaning forward, probably, I say probably, I'm not 100% certain. I would need to do a little bit more posture analysis, but it's probably tight calf muscles. So his tight calf muscles here are saying we couldn't possibly bring the shin any further forward. Let's take a look over here. See how much sharper of an angle this is? His shin's coming forward, his knee's coming right to the edge of his foot there. In this version, his knee, probably here, comes about to like the white line on the shoe here. So he has a limited ankle dorsiflexion, that's bringing the toes this way. He has limited ankle dorsiflexion because his calf muscle is telling his brain it's already at full length. Calf muscle is telling the brain, I can't stretch any further. Now, that's not true, but that's what is being said. Maybe it is true. Maybe he has really bad scar tissue, but for the most part, it's probably just a tight muscle. He probably just doesn't stretch it out enough or very often. So his brain has gotten used to saying, this is how long the calf can get. It has altered proprioception rather than being aware of the fact that it can go out to here. Does that make sense? Danny, you unmuted. You had a question. Does that make sense, everybody?
No, I just want to say when in that poster and the before, he's putting like too much work in his lower back, right?
Yeah, it is definitely. So it's putting all this extra pressure here. Yeah, 100%. And it's probably caused from tight calves. Could be tight hips too. It could also, just so you guys know, it could be tight hips as well. We'll talk about that later. But he's got altered proprioception either way. He thinks he's doing a squat, right? His brain is getting all this information saying, yeah, we're moving the right way, right? He's got altered proprioception. So if we can train our client for balance and we can increase their mobility and increase their flexibility, we get them to move through a full range of motion. I mean, how many times have you guys ever gotten stretched out by like a friend or a trainer or something like that? And then afterwards you're like, holy crap, is this how much I'm supposed to be able to move? Like, right? You restore your proprioception. Now, let's say you take somebody who has zero bad habits and you make them squat. They're going to have perfect form because their brain knows exactly what they're doing. Look at this kid. That is an exceptionally good form squat. They are killing it. They got perfect angles here. They're breaking parallel, right? Knees are tracking perfectly over the toes. They're not caving in, they're not caving out, literally moving exactly as they're designed because their nervous system hasn't really experienced any stress yet. It hasn't really experienced any bad habits yet. It hasn't gotten used to sitting on their wallet and then, you know, shifting their hips a little bit. It hasn't gotten used to keeping the knees closed together because you're sitting on a crowded subway, and so you're contracting your adductor muscles all day. You know, hasn't experienced any of that. Hasn't driven a car, just like driving around like this. What are you doing? You know, like, hasn't developed any of that tension. It hasn't altered they haven't altered their proprioception. So that's what we're looking for, right? We really want to enhance, we want to understand that we are training our nervous system whenever we move. We are giving our nervous system information. And the more information that it has, the more it is going to learn how to move either properly or improperly. So that's proprioception. So movement is a response to the sensory information coming in, dictated by your nervous system, right? So info goes in, and this gives us the importance. This kind of like, now that we understand all that, this is why it's so important for us to train in what we call a multi-sensory environment. A multi-sensory environment is going to give us the most information. This is why we start all of our clients in what is called NASM's stabilization level. If you look at the OPT model, this is where we start our clients. We start them here at the bottom of this staircase in the stabilization level. For those of you who've been with me for a little while, you guys know that the stabilization level is all about unstable versions of exercises. Should I give my client a bench press or a cable chest press? Well, if they're a brand new client, if I give them a cable chest press, you know what they have to do? They have to use their core. They got to strengthen, they got to screw their foot into the ground so they don't lose their balance. They got to like move it properly. And meanwhile, the cable's kind of like wiggling a little bit the whole time, right? They're going to work all those micro muscles, and it's going to give them a lot of sensory information. Now, does that mean that the cable chest press is better than the bench press? No, definitely not. It just means that for a beginner client who might not have very good proprioception, that's where I'm going to start. And once they learn good habits of how to press effectively without raising their shoulders up, without reaching their head forward, without arching their back, once they learn how to do all that, they've got this like all this information. Their brain knows it's like, oh, I'm supposed to move this way. Now I can move them to the bench press, and now I can start raising the weight up. But at first, I got to start with that other stuff. I need to build a foundation of developing proprioception. And that's the most effective way to create long-term changes that's going to properly train our clients how to move effectively. Okay, questions, comments, concerns so far? Fun comments? What do you guys think?
Everything good.
Love it. All righty. Sorry, I try not to be on my phone as much. I'm just trying to. Day one of class, you know. I think we got a new student coming in the afternoon who wasn't signed up until today, which is awesome. You know, the more the merrier. All right, let's take a look at some of the anatomy here. I do want to zoom in a little bit just so we understand how all this information is being relayed. The cellular stuff, not as important in this course, so I'm probably going to move through this a little bit quicker. You know, big thing I want you guys to understand are some of these main principles today. But let's talk about neurons, because there are bajillion, well, not bajillion, there's billions of them in your nervous system, right? So what is a neuron? Well, a neuron is just a fancy name for a nerve cell, right? All the various cells in the body. This looks just like any other cell. If you go back to high school biology, you think of that classic like animal cell, you know, that we all saw. You know, it's got all the normal characteristics you're going to find, right? It's got a nucleus in the center, little Golgi apparatuses here, mitochondria for sure. It's actually packed full of those. Endoplasmic reticulum, ribosome. It's got all the classic cell stuff in it. And that's fine. We're not going to spend all day talking about that. But what's really cool about neurons is that they've got a really unique shape. And this is, you know, you guys know, those of you who have been with me for a long time, you know my favorite thing, form follows function, right? Neurons are shaped a very specific way because they have a very specific function. They need to create a communication network. So look at all these fingers that they have, right? There's the normal cell part there. But look at all these extra little fingers that are reaching out over here and over here, right? And then it's got this big long tail as well, right? This big tail here. And then that tail is covered in this little fatty material called myelin. So what this makes the neuron extremely good at is taking electrochemical signals from here, sending it to the center of its body, down the tail, and into another neuron or another neuron or another neuron until eventually it gets to like a muscle. So now our neurons are very good at basically zapping our muscles, right? And helping us create contractions. Or maybe it zaps a gland, right? Or maybe it just goes up to the brain. It zaps neuron to neuron to neuron, goes to the brain, right? So that's kind of the cool shape of the neuron. So they got this like fatty material to protect that electricity so it doesn't get like, you know, doesn't run off where it's not supposed to go, and all the normal stuff. So that's what our neuron sort of looks like. And there's billions of these. Now, there are going to be sort of three major categories of neurons. And this is going to look kind of familiar. So three main classifications of neurons, right? You've got sensory neurons. Remember sensory function, right? Guess what they do? They gather information, they send it to the brain. Okay, so these transmit, we call that an afferent impulse. Now, really quickly, just on behalf of biology teachers everywhere and kinesiology teachers everywhere, I want to apologize for the fact that we've got two terms here that are very confusing: afferent and efferent. I know they sound the same. It drives me crazy too. I will try to enunciate clearly so that you can tell the difference. Afferent neurons versus efferent neurons. No, so drives me nuts, but an afferent nerve impulse, an afferent neuron or a sensory neuron is a neuron that is going to the brain. So it is going from an effector site, right, towards the brain. So again, let's say I like touch something really sharp, you know, like a thumbtack or something. Sensory neurons are going to send that information towards my brain. It's going to go from sensory neuron to sensory neuron to sensory neuron until eventually it gets all the way to my brain. And then we've got motor neurons. Motor neurons are going to transmit efferent, with an E, impulses away from the brain towards my effector site, right? So now it's going to go from my brain to a muscle to recruit it, right? So if we look at like, let's see here, stretch reflex. Take a look at what's called the stretch reflex. That's a very low quality image. No, come on, give me the one with attack. That was the perfect example, but the image sucks. What if I click it? Will I get a bigger version? Oh, that's not so bad. There we go. Now I can zoom in. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're talking about here, right? So what's going to happen is he's going to touch, in this case, it's a candle instead of something sharp. Okay, so sensory impulses are going to travel from sensory neurons up to the brain, right? So it goes, you know, in this example here, they got a spinal process here. So it goes into the spinal process, let's say, you know, probably somewhere right in through here. So then it travels up to the brain. Your brain's going to go, holy crap, that is hot, right? So then what it's going to do is it's going to recruit motor neurons, right? It's going to send the signal back to the part of the spine, down the central system, and then it will switch to the peripheral system down here, and it's going to recruit the bicep, and then the bicep's going to make you go, ugh, and it's going to contract. You're going to pull that arm away, right? So information goes in and information comes out. Again, it's a communication network. So sensory information goes from an effector site to the brain. Motor information goes from the brain to an effector site. So that could be a muscle, it could be an organ, you know, it could be, you know, again, like my taste buds. if something salty touches my taste buds, right, goes up to my brain, it's like, oh, that's salty, and then all of a sudden I start salivating, make some more spit. Now we obviously need to be able to get, there's not just like one wire all the way from, let's say, my foot up to my brain, right? That'd be a long, complicated, wire. So instead, we have a bunch of wires connecting to each other, right? And those are your interneurons. Interneurons are transmitting impulses from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. So that's how sensory neurons get towards the brain and motor neurons get away from the brain. They're all connected interneurons, right? And that creates the network that we're talking about here. So when you look at your nervous system, all laid out, look at how it's all kind of wired together. It is very complicated with all these like different fingers and branches. We always draw it like this because it's like an electrochemical signal. And what's very fascinating, and I won't go over this too much because honestly, I don't understand it as much as like a very deep understanding would have. But if you've ever wondered like how your thoughts work, like think about how many thoughts you can have. It's crazy. There's only you've only got billions is a lot of neurons, but like there's only so many combinations of things. Think about how many thoughts and actions and all the stuff that you create every day. Well, what's really cool about that is it's all about the sequence. It's about like which neuron. So if you went from, I'm going to use you guys as your names as my example. If I went from Marjan to Danny to Chris to Marvin to Julio to Cyrus, that might be something that tastes really sweet, But if I went from like Marjan to Cyrus to Julio to Marvin to Chris to Danny, very different order there. If I did that, it might taste really salty. That's the difference between all of our thoughts and our actions and our feelings, right? It's just the combination of like how these neurons fire. And the more you do it, remember it is, there we go. Look at that freaking complicated thing. The more you do it, like I said, it is an electric signal, right? Well, electricity is pretty freaking hot. And so it actually kind of burns your neurons a little bit. And that is how we get good at particular movements, because we get really familiar with going in a sequence and we get better and better and better at the movement. Danny, I'm sure, I think you were talking about this yesterday, right? You were like, you did some movements as we were going through the speed ladder and stuff. And then you got better and better at it every time we went through it, right? And eventually we got better and more centered on our side shuffling. We got more and more familiar with the movements. And the reason we get better at stuff is because like we just run the same signal over and over and over and over and over again. We get better and better and better and better at it, right? I always like to
need a lot of.
Yeah, you can say you need a lot of them. Me too, man. You got to remember, like, think about how many times I've demoed those speed ladder exercises. I got a lot of practice on that stuff. So yeah, you get better at it every time you do it, I always like to use the analogy of like commuting to work, like first time you went to work, you probably had to look at the route and figure out how to get there. And then, the better you get at it, you're like, oh, you know what? This road sucks. I'm going to take it right here and go down the side street and get back in. Like you get more efficient as the more often you do something. That's how your nervous system works. That's how your neurons work. And that's one of the reasons why we look at sort of our microanatomy here, is to give us that understanding. So now I do want you guys to do a little bit of reading here. Yeah, it's fun, right? So I got a little bit of not traditional homework, but homework for you guys. A little bit of reading here. You've got 2 books in your bag. You have got your NASM Essentials of Personal Fitness Training. That is your main textbook. For the record, that is the main textbook in the PFT program, right? And that's going to look like this. It should be this picture of a trainer there and a girl doing a cable chest press, right? That's a low quality image. So it should look like that. This book here. Now I will say this, I actually need to update these pages. This slide, that is actually inaccurate. It's not pages 18 to 19. Danny, I'm gonna remute you if you don't mind. So that's the, it's not actually pages 18 or 19. Oh, not that one. So yeah, so if you guys look on the screen right here, your camera's going, that's not a face. But yeah, it's not that one. The one you just held up is this one. You're holding up this one, Marjan. I love this book. It's great, but that's not the one we're using in this course. So this isn't your main textbook. This is the sports performance textbook. In fact, you're not even going to need this until your second mod, guys. That's the corrective exercise. That's this one. This one you're not going to need until capstone. This one here is the capstone textbook. You're not going to need this till you get to Mo's class. The one I want you to have is this one. The girl doing the chest press. So this is your main textbook. This right here is, if you lose your bag, this is the book you want. Okay. This is the one you want to replace. The other one is the Trail Guide to Movement. The other textbook you're going to need is this one. And I'm actually not sure which cover you guys have. I think it's either this one or this one. But it's with like the little people kind of building a body. That's the Trail Guide to Movement. So if you want to read about the information that I just went over, you want to get that anatomy and see those terms, yeah, that one. That is this one right here, pages 141 through 142. That's going to update you on where the reading is for this. I will update these pages today because I'm actually not sure what they are. We switched in the 7th edition, which is this one, the new one. They moved the pages around a little bit because the pictures changed the size of everything. So I will update those. But anyway, all right. So those are our neurons, and you can find that neuron anatomy in those books. But let's take a look here at the divisions of our nervous system, right? So like I said earlier, you get two primary divisions here. You have got your central system, it's your brain, your spinal cord, and you get your peripheral system, which are all the nerves branching out from there. So the central system is really the key decision maker here. The peripheral system is in charge of like carrying out the jobs, right? So like, again, the central system is the CEO, and the peripheral system would be all the workers. Workers are going to get information to the CEO, and they're also going to, execute the CEO's decisions, right? So it provides all that connection point. When I talk about like touching and you're feeling that, right? That's your peripheral system that's feeling it. Or if I talk about recruiting a muscle, that's your peripheral system executing. But your brain, your central system, is what told it how to do that. So we need to divide this down into, understanding what types of decisions are voluntary and what types of decisions are involuntary. Because there's a lot of stuff that your nervous system controls and moves and, contracts and stuff that isn't voluntary, like my stomach, right? Again, I eat some food, it sits in my stomach, and I want, I don't want to have to consciously think about like, all right, that's fully digested, let's go ahead and move it into the small intestine. Like I don't have to think about that, right? Or my heart. Imagine if like I had to give this whole lecture right now and you had to listen to all this. Meanwhile, you also have to remember to beat your heart every second. Like that's that's a lot to think about, right? So we'd have two primary divisions of our nervous system here. You are going to have your somatic nervous system, and your autonomic nervous system. So it's going to look, come on, load. Man, the internet does not want to give me high quality images today. There we go. It's going to divide into the somatic division and the autonomic division. So the somatic division is your voluntary movement. So like when I contract my arm, I'm telling my arm to do this. I have voluntary control over that, right? if I blink my eyes, if I use my voice, right? If I take a breath in, that's very voluntary, although it can be very involuntary depending on, you know, how it's being controlled. So that's the somatic part of your nervous system. If you have voluntary control over it, it's somatic. So a lot of times we're training the somatic parts of our nervous system when we're in the gym. You know, we're consciously deciding to do our shoulder presses or whatever. But there is also a lot of autonomic stuff that we're training as well, even if we don't have control over it. So this is the involuntary movement, right? So your autonomic division is like your heart rate. That is very autonomic. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I inevitably have one person every time who's like, I took a workshop on how to control my heart rate. Yeah, you can probably control your heart rate, but you do not have somatic control over your heart rate. You cannot say, I want to stop my heart and I want to beat my heart. You don't have control over it. It's autonomic. It's wired that way on purpose, so that you don't, you know, goof up your rhythm. Your stomach acid, right? When we move stuff around, when you swallow something and it just automatically contracts, you can feel those little, you know, contractions traveling down to your stomach, right? That's all autonomic, right? If I make you guys, I want really quick, just think in your brain about the saltiest, most wonderful, delicious, salty pizza you've ever had. Picture. Did your mouth water up a little bit? Autonomic. You don't have control over that, right? That's what we mean. So we do train our autonomic stuff, even if we don't have control over it. So for instance, if I put stress on the stuff that I have somatic control over, like my legs, and I get on a treadmill and I start sprinting uphill, right? Guess what? My autonomic system, which would be my heart, is actually getting trained. I'm learning how to control my heart rate. So we still train autonomic stuff. We just don't have voluntary control over it. So those are the two primary divisions there of the peripheral section, right? Somatic, which is voluntary, autonomic, which is involuntary. Now, that involuntary stuff is going to divide one more time. And we are going to have what is called your sympathetic system and your parasympathetic system. The sympathetic nervous system is more commonly referred to as the fight or flight system. This is what increases the heart rate. This is what increases your breathing rate. This is what increases your sweat rate, right? This amps up certain metabolic processes. So that's your sympathetic nervous system, right? It's the stress, right, system. So when you go to the gym, your brain doesn't know what a gym is. You're still like a cave person, you know, like biologically at least. You know, we're still wired the same with the same working parts that we were when we were just, you know, new organisms. So like our brain doesn't know what a barbell is or what a gym is. It just knows that we're experiencing stress. It thinks we're fighting a bear, you know, like or running away from a woolly mammoth, you know, like our brain sees things that way. And so when we're exercising, we activate our sympathetic nervous system. Our body's like fight or flight, baby, you know, let's go. So then this is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to actually warm up, because you can slowly turn on your sympathetic nervous system rather than slapping awake your sympathetic nervous system. You know, it's like, hey, we're engaging in exercise on purpose. And so your brain experiences good stress. Now, if you just go straight in and just start sprinting, your brain goes, oh, clearly the only reason we are jumping straight to the most intense effort here is because I am in danger. And it will activate the really intense parts of your sympathetic nervous system. That's the bad stress. The problem with the world we live in now, we got a lot of bad stress. You know, we got taxes, we got exes who are texting us. We got appointments that we're late for, you know, bills to pay, traffic and getting cut off in traffic, right? All that stuff activates our stress. You know, we don't get enough sleep, right? All those things. And so our sympathetic nervous system is often creating or experiencing intense stress. So our parasympathetic system, this is the exact opposite. Parasympathetic system is often called the rest and digest system. This is responsible for calming things down. So if your sympathetic system increased your heart rate, your parasympathetic system is going to decrease your heart rate. Again, all of this is autonomic. You don't have control over this, right? But you do have control over other things, right? Let's say you're really stressed out, or let's say you're really mad, you're really angry, you're upset with someone, right? You're trying not to punch them in the face. You know, you're experiencing sympathetic, autonomic, this isn't, you don't have control over this, stress. So you just take a second. That's the stuff you have voluntary control over, right? I can somatically contract my diaphragm. And I can learn to calm down. It's not going to happen quickly. It might take a minute or two, but I can affect my sympathetic or parasympathetic stuff, and that will activate it, right? So this is another reason why it's so important to warm up and to cool down. By warming up, you're signaling that this is purposeful stress. And by cooling down, you are signaling that the stress is over. So your body relaxes, right? I challenge you guys, because I know cool downs are like the number one thing that we all try to skip. I get it. I'm human too, I teach this stuff for a living and I skip my cool downs all the time. I encourage you guys, next time you work out really intensely, just take a minute, go hop on that treadmill for 5 minutes and walk. Just walk, think about whatever you want to think about. Then go take a few minutes to go stretch out. Maybe do a little bit of foam rolling, and you tell me if you feel better the rest of the day. You'll just be in this relaxed, really cool state, I don't want to go down a major tangent here, but Danny, we were talking about this yesterday. I did cryotherapy, whole body cryotherapy for the first time. Without going down a rabbit hole here, I'm not a huge believer, but I got a really big discount and I want to try it. Maybe I'll be a convert. We'll see. But I will tell you, it is real stressful to be in a chamber that is negative 150 degrees. It's freezing my butt off. But afterwards, I walked out of there. I was just like, nothing can bother me. Oh, look, a saber-toothed tiger. I felt really zen. I felt very, very calm for about an hour afterwards because I was real stressed out. So my sympathetic system got very activated. And then my parasympathetic system flooded me with all this anti-stress afterwards. And I felt pretty good. So that's the one thing so far. Now, whether or not that stuff works, it's up for debate. I will let you guys know when I've goofed around with it more. All right. Now, that section, you want to see that in your book. There's our page numbers. Again, I need to update these page numbers for the second half. This is accurate. This is not. So I will fix that. All right, let's move into our last little bit here. Let's talk about like how you're not.
Can you go back, please?
Yeah, what you need? The pages?
The pages, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, the bottom ones, you're in the 7th edition now, which means they moved these pages. I gotta update this.
Okay.
I totally forgot that these slides were even in here. I gotta go through all the PowerPoints today and I'll fix all that because we just moved to this since the last time I taught this class. And NASM always does this where they update the book and then they don't update my slides. You got it? Okay. So
yes. I was trying to
I know.
unmute myself.
Yeah, I know. It's a real pain. I'm like, I have the advantage, I never have to like mute or unmute. Okay, so let's take a look at the last little bit here. Because we've been talking about the nervous system. How does it interact with the rest of the body though? Like where's all this information coming from? This is where your sensory receptors come in. Sensory receptors are so freaking cool, guys. Oh, I love them. They're specialized structures and they transform stimuli into information that your brain can understand. It's like a translator. So for instance, like heat. If your body experiences heat, you got heat, these receptors go to your brain. So like, hey, guess what? It's this. And your brain goes, it's hot. Light, sound, taste, motion. One of the things, again, just sharing a personal experience. I went to this cryotherapy thing. It's so cold. So it's colder than anywhere on the planet. We don't experience cold like that. And I didn't really feel that cold at first, which is crazy to say. But when I got in there, I was like, this kind of isn't that bad. And it's and I was talking about this with my girlfriend last night, and she was like, that's crazy. I mean, it sounds so cold. And I was like, it is so cold. But I think my assumption is that it's so cold, your brain has no frame of reference for understanding that much cold. So it didn't feel that bad because my brain was like, yeah. I did my sense, and I'm wondering if I go today, when I go today, if it's going to be like, I'm going to have a more of a, if it's going to be worse, because my brain will sort of be used to it from one repetition, you know. So it takes all this information, pressure, stretching, light, sound, you know, vibrations, all that information turns in, right? So there's a lot of different receptors out there. There are nociceptors. Those are pain receptors, right? They don't turn on until they hit like a certain threshold. So if I start pinching my skin, it's not really that bad. But if I really wrench down, I'm like, that's my nociceptors turning on. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and you know, and now it's like really intense. I got chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors are your taste buds, right? Your nose. They sense chemical changes. Your blood, when your blood has more lactic acid running through it, chemoreceptors in your heart speed up the heart rate. Photoreceptors, those are the ones in your eyeballs, right? We all have pretty much the same photoreceptors, unless if anybody in here is colorblind, we're missing a couple, right? And that's what creates, like, you know, maybe you're red-green colorblind, or, you know, other versions of, I don't know enough about colorblindness, but you know, that's what creates that, right? And so the one we're going to talk about, the one that's important to us, are mechanoreceptors. Mechanoreceptors sense mechanical changes. So they sense like physical changes, right? They respond to touch, pressure, stretch, all of these different sort of feelings. So remember earlier when I was saying proprioception is, you know, one muscle saying, I'm at this length, and the other muscle saying, I'm at this length. And it's like, eventually you get all this information coming in and your brain interprets it. It gets that from mechanoreceptors. So muscle spindles, this will be the first one. Muscle spindles, they basically live in your entire muscle. Look like this. They run end to end in your muscle, and they coil around your muscle itself. So you can see, kind of looks like a spring here, right? And if that spring, it's like a slinky. You get stretched out or it gets really compressed. And that tells your brain whether your muscle is stretched out, it's in a lengthened position, or if it's compressed, it's in a shortened position, it's contracting. So the muscle spindle is telling your brain how long your muscle is. So muscle spindles are mechanoreceptors. They're part of your nervous system, even though they live in your muscle, that sense the changes in the muscle length. They also sense the rate of that length change. So if you change the length of your muscle really rapidly, right, like really explosively, your brain goes, right? Nobody tear a muscle right now, but you've been in a relaxed position, you know, you're listening to my lesson. Do not pull a muscle, but everybody, you can just go like this. Open up your chest as fast as you can. Did you get a little flush? Do you feel like a little tingling, like maybe your nervous system kind of like feels like it's on fire a little bit? When you rapidly stretch like that, a lot of your muscle spindles just get stretched all at once and they go, and your body thinks that it's under stress. So then it increases blood flow and you kind of feel that tingling kind of run around everywhere. So those are your muscle spindles, right? Remember we talked about stretch reflexes earlier. I touch something, the information goes in, and I move away. That's where a muscle spindle kind of comes in. Now, one of the other ones that we got that's a really big one is what's called your Golgi tendon organ. This is also part of your nervous system, but this one doesn't live in the muscle. This one lives in your tendon. Your GTOs actually live at either the origin or the insertion of your muscles as they're about to, they live in here, as they're about to grab a bone, right? So that's you can see here's our tendon, here's our muscle, and they're there to sense tension or rate of tension changes. So muscle spindle said how long the muscle is. Golgi tendon organ is sensing how much tension in the muscle is. And when I say tension, what do I mean? I mean grip. It's like, you know, your muscles are all attached to your bones, right? Well, what happens if you lose that grip? It detaches and you pull the muscle, you if it's full detachment, that muscle is going to roll up your body. That's really bad. That's a torn muscle terribly, right? So Golgi tendon organs sense the tension in the muscle. If there's a really high amount of tension, that muscle is likely to tear. So they live in the tendons of our muscles, and they're communicating with our nervous system and sending information to our brain to tell it how much tension there actually is. So again, I go back to my duck analogy here. I know it's a weird one, but if it's got feathers and webbed feet and it quacks, right? It's a duck. It's information coming in. Well, if a muscle spindle is saying, hey, the bicep is at 50% max length, that's about here. And then the tricep is saying, well, I'm also at 50% max length. And then the amount of tension in my tendons here and here and here and here, right, are going up to my brain saying, yeah, and there's very little tension right now. There's about this much tension. All that information goes into my brain, and my brain goes, oh, we must have the arm bent halfway. If it's here, it gets different signal. If it's here, it gets a different signal. That's how my brain understands where it is in space. That's my proprioception. So we go back to that guy earlier. And we look at this guy here, who's leaning excessively far forward. I said he probably has tight calf muscles based on what I can see, right? His knees only coming to here, right? That is where the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs in his calf are saying, whoa, we are at max length. You cannot stretch us any further. So that information goes up to his brain. And his brain goes, oh, well, if I can't stretch any further, but I still want to squat down, I got to do other things. I got to stick my butt out. I got to drop my chest down. Now this muscle doesn't have to stretch anymore. So he has altered proprioception because his muscle spindles and his Golgi tendon organs are dirty, filthy liars. They're saying, no, we couldn't possibly stretch anymore. This is like, it's so funny. My dad and my mom, when I was growing up, this would happen. I saw this happen a million times. My dad would be like, he'd look at my mom, he's like, do you have any money? My mom would go, no, I don't have any money. My dad would go, all right. And then he'd pull out a credit card or something. He was trying to pay cash. Mom didn't have any money. He didn't want to use his card. He used his card anyways. And a couple days go by, same thing happens. My dad's like, I don't have any cash. Do you have any cash? He's like, no, I don't have any cash. Right. And then, but then let's say they go somewhere and it's cash only. My dad's like, oh no, I don't have any cash again. Looks at my mom, do you have any cash? My mom's like, no. And he's like, well, they don't take cards. She goes, oh, they don't take card? Here you go. And she pulls out some cash. My mom will squirrel away. She will lie to my dad. She's done it forever, like years, and it's her favorite thing. And my dad knows it. We both know it. And my dad, we live that way on purpose. My mom's so much better at saving, and she does that because she knows my dad will just burn through cash like crazy. He's very, my dad's not a saver, and my mom is very frugal. But like she's giving absolutely, it's the wrong information. Your muscle spindles are kind of like that. They're like, no, we couldn't possibly stretch any further, when they absolutely can. But we do want to do it safely, because that muscle spindle really does kind of respond to length changes and speed of length changes. So if you want a muscle to relax, it's very important to slowly open that muscle, because then it will tell the brain, all right, I guess we've got some room. If it goes slow, it's safe. If it goes fast, you'll actually cause that muscle spindle to fire. And a lot of times the muscle will actually contract in response. This is one of the reasons why you should never bounce when you are doing your stretches. How many times do you guys see people in the gym and they're like, they got really tight hamstrings. They're like, and they do this thing and they like bounce, right? You should never do that. Because what that does is that activates your muscle spindles. It sees fast rate changes, so it thinks it's going to tear the muscle. So it actually fires the muscle and it makes it less flexible rather than more flexible. Now what's really cool is we actually can take advantage of this anatomic arrangement here. If we want a muscle to relax, we can kind of trick our muscles. we can actually put pressure on the Golgi tendon organ through maybe something like foam rolling or massage, or yeah, big long stretches, right? So we put pressure using a foam roller and it hurts a little bit, right? You're like, oh, or use a massage gun, something like that, right? Puts pressure. And if you do it on the Golgi tendon organ, or if you do it on a node for the record, like a knot. But if you put pressure on that Golgi tendon organ, it activates it first. It goes, ah, 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 right? It thinks there's a whole bunch of tension. It thinks that your muscle's about to tear off the bone because you're putting pressure on it. And so now it thinks that it's like, maximal tension. Like it's like that scene on Spider-Man 2. He's getting pulled end to end. That's the Golgi tendon organ being activated. But if you sustain that pressure for about 30 seconds, your nervous system changes its mind. It changes its mind. It realizes, you know what? Safest course of action is to stop trying to pull back because clearly this pressure is not going away. Safest course of action is to relax to full length. So if you put pressure near the joint where the tendon's located, right? In this case, my pec minor, right? It will actually cause the muscle to fully relax back into its full length. We call that autogenic inhibition. I'll teach you more about that later. But that relaxes the muscle. And this is why static stretches work the way they do. The reason you need to hold your stretches for 30 seconds is because it shuts the muscle down and allows that autogenic inhibition to kick in and fully stretch us out. Now, there are times when you shouldn't do that, and we'll talk about that later. But that is how that one works. Last little joint receptor, or last receptor I want to talk about today. We do also have joint receptors. Oh God, I'm kicking you guys out left and we lost. I'm losing you guys left and right. We've got joint receptors as well. Joint receptors actually don't live in your muscle. They don't live in the tendon. They live within the joints. So this is going to be, this is going to be like, Ruffini endings, sometimes called Pacini and corpuscles. There's actually a lot of joint receptors. NASM is just going to kind of boil it down and loop them all together. They all kind of do the same thing, but their job is to sense pressure within a joint. So if you are like, let's say you're kneeling on something and you feel like a little bit of like pressure in your knee, that's a joint receptor. They sense whether you're accelerating or decelerating within the joint. So that's your skeletal system communicating with your nervous system. So the muscle spindle is your muscles, your Golgi tendon organ is your tendon. That's your muscular system communicating with your brain. The joint receptors are your skeletal system. So again, kinetic chain, right? All this information coming in. And that's how your brain knows certain movements. When we correct our client's form, we make sure they're doing things properly. We want to encourage them. It's like, do you feel how this is different than what you were doing before? And they're like, oh yeah, right? Now we're developing proprioception. And eventually they're going to learn how to move the right way every single rep. And that's going to keep them safe and make them more athletic. So a lot of times when somebody gets good at stuff and when they're a new client and they're improving, a lot of times it's like they're like, I'm getting so much better at this movement. I must be getting really stronger, right? I must be putting on muscle. Not yet. Putting on muscle takes a lot of time, but they are getting stronger. That is still true. It's just that their nervous system is experiencing changes. That'll come before the muscular system does. So here are the page numbers for that. And guys, that is the end of day one. Like I said, it's a lot here in kinesiology. It does get pretty technical, but we've got a lot of really fun stuff to talk about. Hope you found it really enlightening. Just to summarize everything we talked about today up, like I said, there's going to be 3 components we're going to go over the next few days: skeletal, muscular, and obviously today we went through the nervous system. Your nervous system is the communication network, right? It's all of the billions of neurons working to control your skeletal and muscular systems. And that's about it, ladies and gents. Any questions today, guys? Questions, comments, or concerns?
I'm good, sir. Thank you.
Love
So
that.
far, so good.
Hey, I love it. All right, well, let me kill the recording here.